else. The second man said, Lord, I'll follow you, but first let me go bury my father. He's looking for a funeral. A funeral. He said, I want to put my life in your hands, but I'm going to put my father before my service. Now, God calls us to follow Him. And He says that if we will follow Him and forsake houses and lands and mothers and dads and brothers and sisters, that He's going to restore us in this life and in the life to come. But this man said, Lord, I'll follow you, but first let me go bury my father. Now, there are two lines of thought that come with this. One says that the father was already dead and that he wanted to go back home and attend the funeral. Now, if you look at it from that standpoint, that makes sense, does it not? That a man ought to take care of his parents. He ought to take care of them, be with them in their time of sorrow. But the other line of thought, and I believe this is the correct interpretation, is that the man had not died, and he's saying, just as soon as I am rid of all of my obligations, just as soon as my dad and my mother and others that may be in the family, when they have died, then I will follow you. Now listen to me. God did not call you just to take care of things on this earth. As a matter of fact, Jesus answers this with a word that's hard to understand. He said, let the dead bury the dead. Now, what does that mean? I want you to know dead people don't hold funerals. They are the object of, but they don't conduct funerals. So what is the Lord saying? He's saying that those who are dead in trespasses and sins, those who are dead to the spirit life, let them take care of these earthly things. You set your mind and heart on the things of God and you follow Him. You obey the direction of the Spirit, for the time is of the essence. There is an emphasis that we are to follow, and we cannot wait. Jesus, you see, was calling this man to a resurrection trumpet, and here he is settling for an undertaker's shovel. He's willing to stay back and bury folks rather than to go out and find people and bring them to the Lord. Now the question is then, how long will you wait to serve me? If God is calling you to service, how long will you wait before you serve Him? Someone said, if not now, when? If not here, where? If not you, who? I'll follow you, Lord, but I've got several things I need to do first. Can I confess to you? When I was but a young lad, I don't know what age I was. To be honest with you, I must have been around 12, 13, maybe 14. When God first spoke to my heart that He was calling me to preach. I was serious about the matter, and I remember distinctly. I could take you to the place where it occurred. And I stood and I prayed and I asked God for a miracle to convince me that He was calling me to preach. God doesn't work that way. If He had to give me a miracle to make me believe I was called, He would have to give me a miracle every time I wanted to quit. And in my lifetime, I've found several good places, it seemed, to quit. But I could not, because I'm called of God. But I was serious, but did not understand. At a later time in my life, I was just out of high school, enrolled in the University of South Carolina at Clemson. I was... I was preparing to go to school when God called me. By this time, I had decided what I wanted to do in my life, and God was not in it. I had decided where I wanted to invest my life. I had not consulted with God. Now, I want you to know God will not force you into His service. His army is all volunteer. He will not force you into His service. And so He just let me go. Did you know He'll do that? He'll just keep issuing out the line, giving you a longer and longer tether. But I want you to know that He has a place and a time when He's going to call it back in too. And years went by before God stopped me in my run away from Him. And I have learned the hard way that when you're climbing the ladder of success, God will let you, but when He kicks the ladder out from under you, He'll know when to do it so that you'll get on your face and pray before you get up again. And I didn't listen. And one of the things that haunts my mind, and I know every now and again somebody tells me, just a few days ago, somebody very pointedly said, you need to take some time off. But I remember those years that I wasted and did not listen. And I wonder how many people died and went to hell while I was playing little games and running from God. What are you going to do to serve Him? This man said, oh, I believe in you, Jesus, but I've got a funeral to attend. One man's looking for a feather bed, another for a funeral, and the third one is looking for a farewell. Notice what he says. I will follow you, but first let me go bid them farewell which are at my house. Now Jesus answers him by giving him a proverb that everybody in that place that day understood what he was talking about. He calls on a scene from the farm. Now, you young people today don't know anything about what I'm fixing to say. You don't understand what Jesus meant when He said that no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom. But those of us who are old enough to know what it is to walk behind a plow. How many of you did? Let me see your hands. You've ever plowed? Okay, several of you. Some of you old folks. I remember when I first learned how to plow, I'd almost reach up to get a hold of the plow stalks. And I started off behind that horse. As that horse was pulling the plow, I was so proud, I was plowing. I could just see that dirt, that rich brown dirt in the upstate just rolling up in front of that plow. And I looked back to get the approval. And when I did, that plow sort of rolled over to the side, and the point came up out of the ground. And me and that horse was halfway across the field because I could get him stopped. That's what Jesus is talking about. He says that a person who has put his hand to plow and looks back cannot plow a straight furrow, will not be able to keep things like they ought to be, and will always be distracted by those things that come into his world. If you've got to go back home and have a farewell party with your family, if you've got things that are holding you down, you'll never get the work of the Lord done. Paul says it this way. He says, lay aside every sin or every weight and the sin that does so easily beset you, and run with patience the race that is set before you. Set your eyes on the goal and don't let anything keep you from that goal. Here's a defective farmer who says, I've got to go back home and say goodbye to my family. My friend, the call is to follow Jesus. You see, Abraham followed Him by faith. There were times in Abraham's walk that the pathway was unclear, when he didn't know where to go or how to accomplish, but he followed Jesus. Moses, the Bible says, chose to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the riches of the land of Egypt. He was willing to pay the price and to go all the way with God. Paul, who could have been a college professor, he could have been at the top of the heap in the world of theology, but he says, I counted all things but loss for him.